Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick, Caroline Hyde, Taylor Riggs counting you down to that closing bell, here to help take us beyond the bell. It's our global simulcast, joined right now by Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. We welcome in our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube. And Carol, we had 4 straight days of gains here. Pretty strong gains that helped to recoup a lot of the losses that we've had on a year-to-date basis. So I guess today, maybe that just counts as a little bit of a breather rather than a sell-off.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Maybe a little bit of a breather. We're going to get a bunch of economic news tomorrow on inflation and other reads, certainly on the labor market, personal income and spending. And then, of course, Friday, the big jobs report. So maybe investors just waiting to see what the economic data points, Tim, point to in terms of growth going forward.
Maybe. We just had this great conversation with Aaron Kennan, the co-founder and CEO at Clear Harbor Asset Management, and he's worried that the rally that we've seen since March 8th is really short covering. And he said he called this, a bit of a head fake.
You know, Tim, it's interesting. We heard sort of maybe similar comments here. We had Jason Brady of Thornburg Investment Management on TV, and maybe not being as cautious as that, but saying that just looking out over the next 12 to 24 months, Caroline, it does make you a little bit nervous when we're sort of taking a look at what some of the broader yield curve indicators might be telling us.
And then you get an ADP number coming in, 455,000 jobs added. You get strength there. We'll get potentially some reassertion of that strength in the jobs data we get tomorrow, and the next day jobs claims, and then, of course, the all-important non-farm payrolls. All of that really speaks to a fundamentally pretty strong U.S. economy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's, at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. It's about the economic fundamentals. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the corporate fundamentals in a couple of weeks' time when we start to get that next round of earnings from the first quarter. As far as today here, you're looking at a Dow Jones Industrial Average that's going to finish the day down by about 66 points, or about 0.2%. The S&P down 0.6%, or 29 points. The NASDAQ Composite going to finish lower by about 177 points, or about 1.2% here. And the big underperformer of the day, that belongs to the Russell 2000, which is going to close down by about 42 points here on the day, roughly about 2% lower than where it started or where it ended yesterday.
Yeah, really an indication in terms of maybe domestically what's ahead in terms of growth. One thing I've been watching, you guys, I know I like to watch Chinese stocks that trade here in the U.S. NASDAQ Golden Dragon.
How's the NASDAQ Golden Dragon Index doing?
Down 1.25%. Why do I bring it up? Because the U.S. trade chief up on Capitol Hill testifying that maybe a new focus needed as China hasn't changed. Basically, we can't change China's behavior, so maybe it's time to rebuild the U.S. industrial manufacturing base. I do think about how the world is changing kind of on a bigger, broader term.
And, we didn't get a chance to talk a little, or at least on the TV program, about a lot of the Chinese ADRs that have moved lower today on the back of the regulatory announcement, basically with regards to some of these live streamers and how they make money, and the idea that some of these companies like Bilibili need to do more with regards to, tracking the taxation and such.
We can talk all about those as well. Just
How's
quickly,
the yield curve doing?
Well, I'm not actually going to go to the yield curve just yet.
Wow.
I will go to the individual sectors for a radio audience as we do. Thank you, Caroline. They will all be bond proxies as we bring it back into the equity markets. The sector winners, the sector losers, 2 dives down, Carol. And I think what's interesting is it looks a little bit more balanced in terms of green for the gainers, red for the losers. At the top of the screen, it is, energy again, right? Up 1.2%. Food and staples and utilities, as we think about the bond proxies, those are the big outperformers as yields fall on the day. And then just going down to the bottom of the screen, banks, of course, are down about 1.9%. That is to be expected. But technology really has been the big laggard, Carol. You get semis and semiconductor equipment. That sector is down 3% on the day.
Yeah, that's a big hit. All right, let me get to some of the gainers. Lululemon, we were breaking their earnings after the close yesterday. This was definitely an outperformer today.
The shoes.
It's all about the shoes. Stock was up about 10% in today's trade, top of the NASDAQ 100. They were optimistic about their sales outlook for this year, and that did exceed analyst estimates. I mentioned Arhaus before because we were talking about RH, which was one of the bummers, certainly one of the decliners in today's session. Well, Arhaus was certainly a big gainer, up almost 21% in today's trade. This is after reporting fourth quarter results and guidance that beat estimates, still down about 35% for the year overall. And truly, cannabis cannabis, it was a gainer, so don't judge me, but it was up almost, I mean, it's had quite a swing. Caroline was talking about swings earlier. It was down 4%, was up almost 3%, pretty much ending unchanged on the day. Did report earnings.
Is this because of the vote that's going on in the House?
There is optimism. We did see a lot of movement in cannabis stocks. The House expected to vote on a measure in terms of decriminalization for the sector.
We spoke to Boris Jordan a little bit earlier on Bloomberg TV. He wasn't all that, I guess,
optimistic
about it getting through the Senate.
It takes. I feel like we've been having this conversation for how many years? We're going to talk to the True Leaf Cannabis CEO as well, but it does feel like it's a conversation, right, Tim, that we've been having for a long time.
Yeah, looking forward to speaking with Kim Rivers about that in just a few minutes. In the meantime, let's take a look at some of the decliners that I had my eye on today. Apple finishing the day down by 0.7%, down for the first time in 14 sessions following its longest winning streak since 2003. It was higher earlier in the session, but then did move lower. We did see a couple headlines earlier around Apple, an exclusive by Mark Gurman saying that Apple is moving more of its financial services in-house. And then William Turton reporting that Apple and Meta gave data to hackers who forged legal requests. I'm also watching Affirm today, down.
Didn't they pretend they were security
2.9%.
agents or something?
Yeah, and that's a serious issue for these social platforms, right? It's not like a traditional hack per se, because these social platforms do work with law enforcement agencies. I mentioned Mark Gurman's story about Apple increasingly moving financial services in-house. That did move shares of payment stocks. Affirm finished the day down by 2.9%, among other companies that were lower. And then AMC Entertainment, got to give a check of the meme stocks.
Is it all over?
Sorry?
Is it all over?
Yeah, that's the question. Is it? GameStop was also down today, but since March 14th, AMC has been up 117%. So a little bit of a breather for AMC today.
Maybe a bit of profit taking going on across the board. And indeed, it's interesting that you see perhaps stocks on the lower side as commodities push on the higher side. And we've seen this sort of correlation when we worry about oil, we worry about inflation. And look at the vertical that is commodities on your global macro movers, a sea of green. Steel up more than 2%, zinc up at more than almost 2%. Milk's an important one, obviously. Yeah. Meanwhile, WTI crude up more than 3%. Natural gas pushing up higher as well. Significant moves over in Europe. Here in the US, it was up more than 4 percentage points. Talk about inflationary pushes. Talk about, of course, the worry about Russia, Ukraine, and what that means for global supply chains. And weave that into an FX market that therefore actually sees for once the dollar for a second straight day dropping against most of the G10 peers. This is more linked to a yield story, but we actually see Europe, the inflation story hitting there hard. We saw German inflation coming in much hotter than had been expected. We continue to see Spanish inflation hitting an unexpected high. This is therefore potentially seeing that the ECB might have to move, and the euro pushes that much on the upside. Interestingly, the Japanese yen, after hitting a 6-year low, is managing to recoup some of its losses. And lastly, I look at what's happening on the sovereign bond story, and well, there was a sell-off continuing over in Europe. But what about in the US?
You certainly see that, Caroline, as well. Here in the U.S. as well, it was bond price higher, yield lower. After sort of a relentless climb higher in yields, we took a little bit of a breather here today. You're down in yields mostly about 5 to 7 basis points across the curve, but still really elevated levels, Romaine. When you think about a 2-year yield that is up 160 basis points this quarter alone, and a 10-year yield up 85 basis points this quarter alone.
Yeah, I mean, we make a lot of jokes, of course, about the yield curve and what it signals, but I mean, the idea that we've seen this a type of narrowing of that curve down, and the move higher that we've seen in yields here. I mean, there's going to be a lot of superlatives when we get to tomorrow, of course, with the great rebalancing at the end of the month, end of the quarter, whatever we're calling it these days. But, I mean, the losses that you've seen, not just on sovereign debt, but high-yield bonds, on investment-grade bonds, on everything else. So, I mean, it's pretty significant here, and it really raises a lot of questions about what the bond market continues to price in. We had Abigail Doolittle on a little bit earlier, Carol, just talking about how much more volatile right now the bond market is compared to the equity market.
Yeah, interesting to hear her, talk about that in terms of the swings that we've seen on the fixed income side of things. We were just talking, with Aaron Kennan, Tim was talking about that too as well, but just how that in terms of the lot of, whether or not he's concerned about the liquidity coming out of the market and what that does certainly for the equity side of things. So I don't know. There's a lot of discussion going on about kind of where we go next with this.
Yeah, we also got a lot of economic data today. We're going to get a lot in the remainder of the week too, as Caroline mentioned. Caroline, I still have my eyes on what's going on with mortgages, because I think that's a really important one for us to watch, and to what extent these higher mortgage rates are going to actually temper tamper down home sales. Does it cool off the housing market at all? Because that's certainly a huge component when it comes to inflation.
Malcolm Etheridge had been on with us earlier, CIC Wealth, and talking really about how the housing market really is an area that doesn't seem to be reacting as it should, still far too, rallying high. We still have a supply issue on that side. And what that does to sentiment as well. At the moment, with the housing market still managing to remain strong, does that make you feel like you've got less wealth, more wealth? But the question is, at what point mortgages start to eat? And really, what point you get a buyer's strike?
All right, well, we've got a lot of economic data points that we're going to get through tomorrow, so looking forward to that in our conversation. All right, folks, that's going to do it for Beyond the Bell on radio, TV, and YouTube. We'll catch you again for our cross-platform coverage tomorrow.